who's going to talk to us about an interesting topic and a challenging one at that of odor prediction and related to odor, Dr. Vishamjit Kaur. Vishamjit Kaur is a senior scientist at CSR's Central Scientific Instruments Organization at Chandigarh. Her research interests lie at the intersection of agriculture, food and nutrition using the tools of machine learning and big data techniques. She also works in hardware and software development of electronic tongue and nose systems. She uses the electronic nose sensing technology to develop odor source localization techniques. She has got many publications, 20-odd publications to her credit, including those in reputed journals such as Nature and Science. She's a Japanese government next fellow and a recipient of BRICS Young Scientist. So join me in welcoming Dr. Vishamjit Kaur for the next talk.
Thank you, Dr. Begla. So, hi everyone. Today I'll be talking about, like Dr. Begla and everyone has already highlighted the importance of smell and taste in the food products. So today I'll talk about the work which we are doing at CSIO Chandigarh, which is one of the CSIR's lab, about the science of olfaction and understanding why particular molecules smell in a particular way. And I'll also talk about how do we quantify it, how do we measure smell using the different instruments. So let's start with it. So Graham Bell said that if you're ambitious, if you want to find a new science, measure smell. And if you can do that, I think if anyone can really do that, it will actually fetch you, it will get you a Nobel Prize in this time. Smell is one of the least understood of all our senses. We know how vision work, how other senses work, but for smell, it is still mysterious to us. So it is an attempt towards understanding the science of smell. And when we talk about olfaction, it especially coming to the, taking inspiration from the biological olfaction to mimic it and then create then artificial olfactory systems. It requires knowledge of senses and instrumentation, data mining, neurocomputing and perception analysis. And at CSIO, we are working on different aspects such as sensors, structure-odor relationship, airflow dynamics computing models. I'll be talking about this in the rest of my presentation. So the thing is why it is important to measure smell. So there are two basic things. One, of course, like the scientific and then the technological and industrial advantages. Scientific because one, we want to understand how it works just for out of the curiosity. And then it is also about, as we are all discussing about food, then for if we talk about like insects and others, it is also about danger and mate identification. And from the technological aspects, it is about like now we can, we have Skype and everything, we can see each other, we can hear each other. Won't it be interesting if we can also communicate smell over internet? If we can, if in our smart homes we can have, we can create, replicate and identify different kind of smells. So coming to the activities that we're doing at CSIO, as I said, like it's divided into the three main areas: sensor systems and algorithms. So starting with the algorithms part. So the very first question, why does a molecule smell the way it smells? Like we know that there are many molecules which are similar to each other structurally, but still they smell very different. But there are many molecules which are different in structure, but they smell the very same. So why does that happen? Can we understand it? So generally, like the physical space, we call it the space of thousands and hundreds and millions of molecules that are around us, the VOCs that are around us. And then, those VOCs, they enter our nostrils and we have the olfactory receptor neurons and the processing happens. And then we tell about how it's percept, like how it smells. Is it nutty, is it floral, is it fruity? So the whole receptor space, or I would say that our brain, it's still a black box for us. So mostly we try to establish relationships directly from the structure to the perceptual space. So and generally there are many challenges to it. The very first challenge is, that is the inability of human language to describe smell. We do not have many words to describe smell. And if you will see that, the way we describe smells in English, or maybe some of the communities that they do in their local languages, they have different words for the smell that probably sometimes you don't even understand. Then the another thing with olfaction is, with smell is, that the space is not continuous. What I mean by that is that if you talk about vision, we have this RGB. We know that we mix this much of red and green and then blue and we get this particular color. For smell, we have no idea. We do not know that it is even quite possible. We mix two molecules which are pleasant smelling and we end up with something which is very unpleasant. Try mixing two of your very good perfumes and maybe you will get something that nobody would like to be around you. So we do not know how odors vary continuously in the space. We do not know if we add this particular molecule to already some compound, will that molecule even exist or not? So just forget about the smell. And then of course the size and dimensionality. There are so many molecules, there are so many million of molecules, which makes the problem even much more difficult. So the very first question that we try to answer, using the techniques of data sciences and machine learning, can we somehow find out what are the features which are responsible for particular smell? So for this end, like we collected data sets which are from different sources, like perfumery, agriculture, and of course culinary, and then we find out its various features, like the physical chemical features, like such as its molecular weight, number of sulfur or oxygen atoms, and many other features. And at the same time, we also found what kind of percepts it have. Is it floral? Is it fruity? And we got a database of more than 3,000 molecules with almost 526 percepts. Using this database, first question that we tried to answer was olfactory primaries. As I was saying, in vision we know RGB, in auditory we know that intensity and the frequencies and wavelengths vary, but in olfaction we do not know. So to answer this question, the very first attempt that was made was using the techniques of network analysis, using the techniques of co-occurrence matrices. Like we tried to see which smells co-occur with each other. If there is a molecule and if it can be described by multiple descriptors, how many of these descriptors they co-occur with each other? Let's say if you describe something by fruity, do you also describe it as sweet? And using this we created a co-occurrence network and we tried to find out, using some community detection, we found that there are 7 major communities in it. Some of those communities, for example, if you will see floral. Now floral, it has other percepts like rose, jasmine. I think this is also, like though the rose and jasmine, they're very different kind of smells, but we put it together when we put it together with floral itself. So it is also about the source or the category. Then there are a couple of kind of smell which comes together, for example, bakery, cheese. This kind of smells, they come together because the data sources that we have taken along with the perfume rate is also from the food sources. So that represents the culinary space of olfaction. And surprisingly you will see that some of the smells like garlic, it doesn't come too often in the perfumery data sets because of course you do not want to spray yourself with garlic. But when it is coupled with food, we love eating garlic bread, right? So it evokes pleasant emotions in us. And it was also found that this forms a parlor, which means that mostly there are very few descriptors that co-occur with many others. And they describe the olfactory space. And we try to find out if these disruptors are coming together for the molecules, is it again the inability to describe it? Maybe how do we, in normal day language when we talk about, just when we talk about how do these descriptors they come together. So we use the Google Book database and we try to see what is the semantic space and try to compare it with the olfactory space. And we found that the way we describe things in normal life, like in our normal language, it is very different from the olfactory space. Then the next question, of course, as I was saying, mapping the physical, chemical, and the perceptual space. To this end, of course, we collected data, we did some pre-processing, generated a lot of features which are important from it, and did the modeling. I will not go into details of modeling, but maybe I'll just come to some of the results. So these results, this was specifically done. There was challenge thrown by IBM and Rockefeller University, and they made some data open source, like available, and we worked on this data set. And some of the results indicate that we can predict, like given, let's say, a desired sensory profile, we can sort of reverse engineer the molecular structures out of it, and given the molecular structures, also to predict what will be its sensory profile with very good accuracy, which was done for the very first time. And there were also a couple of other interpretations. For example, like some of the features which were found, for example, something like the frequency of the carbon and the sulfur bonds. Maybe I should not go into too much of details, but yeah, we found that, the presence of the sulfur or some presence of some, or like similarities to some particular substructure give us a particular kind of smell, maybe a burnt smell or a fishy smell. So, yes, so the next step that we did, now we are trying to create a continuous space of smell using the deep learning techniques, using the vector representation of smell notations. Like our purposes, can we have some sort of a space in which we can say that this is fragrant and this is unfragrant? If we move from this point in space to the other point in space, and the way we move from one point to the another, can we define that way? Can we predict what the next smell will be? Okay, now coming to the next part, which is about sensors. Right now I was talking about algorithms. Sensors to measure the smell. So mostly the sensors which are available, they are, let's say they measure there's some interaction between the VOCs, and then there's some change in property of the sensor. That could be the change in resistance, change in the optical properties, or the change in the mass or the resonant frequencies. And using such kind of sensors, we try to measure the VOCs. Now, generally when I talk about sensors, it is not a single sensor, but it is an array of sensors. There are hundreds, and sometimes some of the researchers have even experimented with thousands of sensors putting together, and then trying to use it with the machine learning techniques on top of it to predict the kind of like for the specific problem, to predict the kind of VOCs that we have. So a lot has been done in literature using the optical sensors, using resistive sensors. So this is like one particular kind of sensor, like the material that we are working in CSIRO, that is the conducting polymers. We are experimenting with different conducting polymers, such as PPY, PANI, and then using some of the techniques, some standard techniques, some techniques that we are tweaking by ourselves in combination, and then putting nanomaterials on top of it and testing it for different gases and applications. For example, for methanol, ethanol, ammonia, hexanol, octanol, and maybe I'll skip the technical, like these are some of the results which shows that how the different sensors, they can tell us about the different concentrations of the of the gases that we're trying to see. In this case it was ammonia. Okay, now coming to the another part, maybe this is more relevant. I have a better example. Yes.
So does those sensors work on the resistance, or how they...
Yes. For example, the conducting polymers, whenever there is an interaction, there is a change in the conductance of it. And we then measured it using whatever the voltage divider circuitry, and yes, so there's change in the conductivity properties of the sensors in that case. Like there's either absorption or whatever changes happen there. So, one of the applications for which we are developing sensors, it is for rancidity detection of edible oils. Now we all eat ghee, mustard oil, everything in our households, right? And these things, they also go very rancid. Like we also like to go out, eat our samosas, but we see that how many times single oil has been reheated and reused for frying that. So can we detect this rancidity of oil? Can we detect it using the sensors? So we are trying to do it with metalloporphyrins. You can say that it is a big a molecule like this with a metal center, and whenever there is a molecule comes, like another VOC which we are trying to detect, in this case it is hexanol, which has been shown to be correlated to the rancidity of the oil. There is certain sort of interaction, and that interaction results in change in the colorimetric stoichiometric properties of it. For example, if this was our 6 different metalloporphyrins dots that you can see here, on being exposed to the hexanal, there is change in the color, and this change in the color we are trying to correlate with the rancidity of oils, like how rancid the oil is it edible or not. So we have conducted a lot of experiments, including the theoretical one where we first try to see which kind of metalloporphyrins, which kind of metal centers and the interactions. For example, when the hexanol interacts with it, there is change in the planar structure, which further results in change in the vibrations. So we have done the studies, UV visible and different studies to see how there is a shift in the spectral properties. Sometimes it is a shift in the intensity. Sometimes, like with the different metalloporphyrins, it is a shift in the wavelength as well, along with the intensities. So, these are some of the examples where we found that. Okay, these are only 3 examples. I haven't brought up a very bigger data set here. Like some of the oil samples which were negative, like they were pretty okay to use, and the samples which were positive, they were rancid. We tried to see what was the color before the exposure and the color after the exposure, and this change could be correlated to the rancidity. For example, in this case, you can see that. Maybe because of the projection, like the color has changed, like for this particular dot, and for some it is just the change in the intensity. Maybe from dark it has gone lighter. Then we use further the image processing techniques on top of it, and then try to do it. Like the point is, can even in a household, can we let's say have some sort of a smart jar? We just change the cap, replace the cap with these smart sensors, and just looking at it, can you tell whether this oil is good to use or not? Like this is from the consumer's perspective. So along with as I mentioned about metalloporphyrins, the change in the color, we are also working on the optical electronic noses as well, where we use a bundle of microfibers. Like for the time being, it's the example that I have, it is for the single fiber which has been modified with the materials where they come and, the VOCs, the analytes, they come and they interact with the sensing material, and then there is some change in the frequencies. Again, the intensity or as well as the wavelength. We are trying it for, let's say, the different amines. This one here shows just for the visualization, the change in color. This is for the C2H1, this is for the amines. Like it is a bit towards yellowish, it is towards the this bluish side. It shows the shift with respect to the different VOCs, and we want to use it for for the biogenic amines, for the indicator of food spoilage. Can we tell us if it is good to eat or not, or for the ripening? For example, ethylene is very important for that, or even for something like not related to food, for explosive detection, if we can detect the nitroaromatic vapors using such kind of techniques or not. So now coming to the systems part. So when we come from the sensors to the system, like let's say to make an electronic nose, there are different kind of challenges which are involved in it. Challenges such as the gas flow. I'll come to that. So so this is the prototype of the electronic nose which we have developed at CSIRO. So when I say electronic nose, it basically means that as I talked about sensors, there are sensors. On the top of it, we put a machine learning techniques. We put pattern recognition engine to to tell what kind of VOCs are these. If not specifically the VOCs, then the then the different applications, if we can discriminate between different qualities or something. So when we come from sensors to the systems, when we come to development of such kind of systems, there are different challenges. For example, one of the challenge which we faced was design of the chamber itself, the place where we will put that sensor. For example, this was the array of the conducting polymer sensors that we made at CSIRO, and we designed 3 different chambers with it. This is a very basic chamber design, inlet, outlet, and the sensors will be here. Then this one goes with the zigzag path, this one goes with the zigzag path with some obstacles in between. So we try to see which one will be the best, or be optimized for considering the airflow and everything, and will all the sensors will be exposed to the VOCs entering and going out of there or not. So we found that, for example, the basic chamber design which is generally used, it is obviously not very effective. Like not all the sensors which will be there will get exposed to the VOCs, so we may not get very good signals. Then we tried it with the zigzag path and the one with the directed path, and we found that, of course, the one with the directed path was better in terms of optimization of the different parameters, and we went ahead with that design. Then there are other challenges. When we talk about arrays, then those challenges comes in terms of designing the electronic circuitry as well. So I will not go into too much of details of electronic circuitry, but like there are challenges like leakage current and the crosstalks which happen. So in order to reduce that, we came up with our own circuit arrangements, so we could reduce that and get better signals. Yes, now coming to some of the applications that we have done using the electronic nose. This application, this was not exactly done using the conducting polymers that I showed, but for the standard system of alpha MOS. So this one here shows that we had 8 different varieties of tea. Now we drink tea all the time, but the kind of effort that goes into grading of the tea, that's very surprising. I never thought when I was drinking a cup of a tea that someone is paid just to tell whether it will taste good or not. So there are tea tasters which taste the tea and then grade it, and on the basis of that, the price of the tea is fixed in the market. So the objective is, can we somehow use the instrumentation, the instrumental devices and complement that process in itself. So we took different varieties of tea, like there are different gradations, leaves and the different size of the leaves and the grains, and using the electronic nose, we tried to see if we could find out if we can discriminate between these different qualities. We developed, of course, our own techniques to process the signals that come from these kind of arrays, like the signals which are very time-varying dynamic signals. So this was, let's say, before, like different varieties of teas, like when we did the basic processing, we could not really tell the difference between one from the another. Then we used the optimization, some of the techniques that we developed, and we could clearly identify how one tea was, we could clearly discriminate one quality of tea from the another quality of tea using the electronic nose systems. This kind of experiment was also done to determine the quality of cashews. This work was done with one of the cashew company itself. Now cashews have a problem that, India exports, in India export cashews, but sometimes it comes back. Actually, a major chunk of it comes back because even though it looks good, it looks white or whatever color it should have, it goes rancid. So the question is, can we find out why it goes rancid, what VOCs are responsible for it, and can we come up with a sensor systems to find out the quality of cashews itself, to find out the rancidity of cashews itself. So we got like a lot of cashew, we got to eat many cashews during that time, like we had many samples. And so we, based on the samples, we had like some bad cashews, some good cashews and the mixed ones. We had the sensory scores, so the students and the many other people in the lab and some experts, they ate those cashews and then they scored it on the basis of its color, its taste, and sorry. Yeah, and then we did, I'm really sorry. It's okay. I'm really sorry. I think I speak too fast and then I end up having a dry throat. So yes, so we try to find out what kind of compounds are present in it. So we use like the chromatography, the HPLC and the GC techniques to find out the chemicals which are present in it. And at the same time, we use the electronic noses as well to see if we can correlate those compounds with the signals from the electronic nose, and then we can in future use the electronic noses itself to tell us about the quality of cashews. So so these results here shows that, on the basis of the color, texture, like the cashews, they were of different qualities, and then these results here show that, again, the different quality of cashews and their signals with the electronic nose sensors. So we could, using some of the sensors, we could clearly distinguish between what is good and what is bad. Of course, there is overlap between the cashews which are somewhere in between, which are mixed in the quality. Okay, so after all this, I'll talk about another kind of Odor systems. Thank you. Thank you so much. Which is used for the problem of odor source localization. Now, what does this mean as? Now, let's say in mines, there is sometime leakage of methane or other gases, or there is some explosive, or just some source of load, some source I want to locate. So how do we do it? Generally, let's say even if in this room we assume that there is some particular source of odor that we want to locate. And of course, like if there is an odor source, there are odor molecules which are getting dispersed everywhere. So the process of locating it is called the odor source localization. And in order to do this, many researchers, they have come up with different algorithms mimicking the behavior of insects, dogs, because they are very good at it. So we have developed a technique where we use multiple robots which are working in coordination with each other to detect the source of odor. Now the odor source localization problem in itself is very difficult and very challenging, because along with the odor source itself, because the molecules are getting dispersed everywhere, there are, there are global maximas or local maximas, like there are odors everywhere. And if we do not get any gradient, like the direction in which one should move, generally when we detect it, we see that, what is the concentration gradient. If let's say the source is there, and from the source the molecules are getting dispersed using some vent, or in the closed room, that is not the case. If it is outside, then we also take the information of the vent. Then we use the concentration gradients, like that's the very first and the basic technique that goes, but it generally does not work very well, because if it is sort of distributed equally, then we cannot really follow the concentration. In such kind of cases, the having multiple robots comes with certain advantage. So we developed certain algorithms around it. Those algorithms, like first, of course, using the like there are bots with different sensors on it, sensors which measures the concentration, sensors which measures the wind information, the wind direction. So the very first step that they do is they sense. They get that information. Then in the next steps, like they using that information, they decide where to move next. In the third step, they exchange this information with each other, because now let's say if there are multiple bots, and we want to locate one particular source of odor, we don't want them all at the different places pointing us to the different sources. Like assuming that there is only single source there. So we have designed a certain cooperative mechanism, and on the basis of which the different robots, they share the information with each other, and and decide where to finally go. And in this kind of so maybe this image will make it a bit clear. So let's say this is the true source of the odor, and this was the initial positions of the bots. So like you have to see that this is also time varying. Odor, like the molecules are getting dispersed, at the same time the bots are also moving in the location. So with time it could find the true source of the odor. Yeah. Yeah, like if there are
self-cleaning robots or sort of thing, like in chimneys or something like that.
Yeah, why?
Are you working on it maybe in the future?
Yeah, why not? I mean, this kind of applications can be, like, this kind of systems can be used for a number of applications. Of course, that could also be one of it. Yeah. So the algorithms that we designed, we achieved, like we compared it with the state-of-art standard algorithms, and we found that the success rate was very high also, like the time in which we could achieve that was also very, very good as compared to the standards which already exist. This also fetched out very good publications. So with this, I think I'll like to stop my presentation. And just the shameless publicity, this is my contact information. We do have some open positions for students as interns, as JRF, SRF. So if you are interested, please contact us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Be around. more than the shameless publicity, it is good for the audiences, those who are looking for opportunity, I would say. So thanks for doing that. And yes, please. Yes, of course. 2 questions, and that's the end of it.
About the interface of smell and taste.
Yes. I mean, that's a very important question because it doesn't work independently. So along with the electronic nerve systems, we are also working with the electronic tongues. I didn't come to the electronic tongue systems because the topic was odor and olfaction. But yes, we have also developed an in-house electronic tongue system, and we're trying to fuse the signals from the nose and the tongue itself. I mean, of course, it does not work in a way the human olfaction and this thing works, but we are, yes, I mean, it's nowhere close to it, but yes, we're working in that direction to fuse the signal from the different, the electronic tongue and the noses, and then come up with a comprehensive analysis. In fact, we're trying to club it with the vision itself, because there is also visual information, as I was talking about tea. So there are leaves, there's texture, there's grains, so our brain also processes that information along with the olfaction and the smell and the taste itself.
That's also important.
That we haven't started that yet. I don't think we're doing it. Yes.
E eye and E nose and E
Yeah.
And you are also integrated with the taste also?
Sorry. Yeah, we do have taste sensors. We also,
Human being, it would be possible in
Not yet.
no, I don't think so.
Gaurav, your question. Last question.
Very wonderful talk. I
Thank
have
you.
2 very small questions back to back and interrelated. So the first question is, like you said, like there is when you were introducing the concept of olfaction and making it distinct from the eye where RGB concept was introduced. So I have a question, like in olfaction we have a spatial temporal representation at the level of glomerulus in the olfactory part, and which is the best proxy, which is equivalent to RGB representation in the eye.
Yeah.
So, and that's, so what are your views on that part?
No, of course you're right, and without considering the spatial temporal part, we cannot really process. So that's why you will see that many researchers have come up with, the techniques, like basically the neural network kind of a techniques where they try to process it in a spatial as well as a temporal signal. And even from the sensor's point of view, I can show you one. I have it in my slide.
Sorry, I closed it. Just a moment. Tell me.
I didn't explain it. Yes, so this was one such similar attempt. If you will look at this, this is the mucosa, and this was done by attempted in around 2007, where they tried to put in channel the signal. You can see this is some sort of a chromatograph, where in channel the air flew from this end to the another, and so there is a temporal information as well, they're getting exposed at the different, and there is a spatial information as well, they're spatially placed. So of course from the algorithms and from the census point of view, it is being done. Yeah.
Because of the one last one. So I mean, one biggest concept in the beauty of olfactory system is about the combinatorial coding.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Nature has given us.
Yeah.
So I am very new to this electronic nose, but the design of this electronic nose, does it also takes into account the sensors which you have mentioned? Does it also takes into account the combinatorial coding concept? Because you give a very beautiful example, like 2 different perfumes mixed together, and you have a unpleasant one. It is all based on combinatorial coding. So does electronic nose are there the electronic noses which takes into account this combinatorial coding?
Yeah. I mean, there are people who are trying to do that, but I'd still say we are very far from the reality. There are many limitations in terms of our understanding itself. We do not exactly know how it works. It's still a black box for us, though we do have some understanding, but not enough to completely mimic it. But yes, by taking inspiration from it, yes, people are working on it. And in our lab, we try to do just the spiking neural network sort of techniques to sort of mimic
I'd
that.
love to talk to you after this.
She's available. All speakers are available at lunch. You can eat them along with lunch. Thank you for an enriching talk. I would like to thank Dr. Vishenjit Kaur for a very interesting talk on the sensorial aspect through electronics way. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for inviting me.